And it's just going to take a second to get this all going, and then I'm going to start the webinar. But
Go
I'm
for it.
Make sure that it's connecting on YouTube first. All right, that looks great. And I'm starting the webinar. Okay, we should be good to go.
Great, thank you so much. Okay. Attendees are just coming in, so we'll just wait a couple minutes. Good morning and good afternoon, good evening to some of you. Thank you so much for joining today for our community engagement webinar. We have attendees just coming in from the waiting room. We appreciate your patience. We're just going through some technical issues with the slides, but we'll get started in just a moment. Okay, I think we'll get started. Welcome everybody again. This is our first community engagement webinar of 2022. We have had a lot of activity so far this year with World TB Day in March. We appreciate all of your participation in events around your research sites and communities and for sharing all of that with us. We are looking forward to sharing the latest updates with all of you from TB Alliance side on what's been happening with our study results and most importantly, what's been happening with respect to access to new regimens. Could you advance the slide, Reva? Just a reminder, today we are recording the webinar and we will provide a copy of the webinar to everybody afterward. We have simultaneous translation available in Portuguese and Russian. If you'd like to listen to either of those languages, you can select the language with the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. We will pause after each of the presentations today for some Q&A. We encourage you to raise your hand if you have a question. We will come to any live questions at a few points during the agenda today, but also do not hesitate to write any questions into the Q&A function, and we will get to those questions throughout the meeting today. Next slide, please. Just to share what we're going to be talking about today, I am very pleased to have a co-host for this webinar. If I can introduce Oksana Ruksianu, who most of you know. Oksana is joining us today from SMIT in Moldova. We have worked together for a long time on community engagement in TB studies in Moldova, but Oksana has been a TB advocate for many, many years, and we're very honored to have her join us today to help us with this discussion on advocacy around new regimens. Hi, Oksana.
Hi, everyone. I'm just again understand that I'm having some issues with the phone. Sorry for this.
No problem. Oksana, we can hear you. So it is a little light, but we can hear you from your headphones. Our colleague, Sala Fareda from TB Alliance will provide some research results for BPAL. These are results that have been published and we have shared them before. These will be a top line review of those results and then a little bit of discussion about the newest WHO rapid communication that just came out. Oksana, you seem to have a highlighter on the screen, just making some notes on the agenda, just FYI. After that, we'll welcome Sandeep Januja, our head of market access, to share the updates and next steps around BPAL access, what TB Alliance has been doing, but also what the new guidance means for the community and what the next steps will be. Oksana is going to share experience from Moldova in engaging in TB drug research, but also in policy change from other periods of time when guidelines have changed and new regimens have become available in Moldova, speaking specifically about the role of civil society in that policy change and introduction and uptake of new treatments. Thomas Lynch, our head of communications, will share some messages around how to communicate about BPAL and the new guidance. And then we're also very happy to have with us Luis Zepeda from TB People in the Philippines, who's joining us to share experience of civil society and engagement in research, but also introduction of new drugs from the Philippines. So we will advance now to the next slide, but I just wanted to take a moment to engage all of you in a question. Reva, if you don't mind launching the first poll, which will be on which Predominant studies everyone has participated in. We're just going to try and do a few polls during the meeting today to get some feedback in a couple different ways. So the first question will just be to let us know which studies you've participated in.
Is that under Predominant BPAL studies?
Yes.
Okay.
And you can select all that apply here. These are not all TB Alliance studies. Most are TB Alliance studies. All are Predominant containing regimen studies. Okay, great. So Reva, if you want to close that, hopefully it'll come up with the responses right away. Great. Thank you, everyone, for responding. We have a few participants that are participating in the BPA-MZ Siemens study. We appreciate that, but a lot of you have experience with Nix, Xenix, TB Practical, and several of our partners on today are implementing and are engaging in this Simplicity TB study. Thank you. So I'd like to introduce Salah Fareda, our head of medical affairs at TB Alliance, for the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, and hi, everyone. Glad to be here. My name is Salah Fareda, and I will give a very high-level, quick update on the clinical evidence of BPAL regimen in drug-resistant TB. Next slide, please. So I'll give a quick update on the three clinical trials that included BPAL-based regimens. Nix, Xenix, and TB Practical. Nix and Xenix were conducted by TB Alliance, and TB Practical was conducted by our partners, MSF, or Doctors Without Borders. The story started with Nix TB clinical trial. In Nix TB, we recruited patients with XDR TB, or some selected patients with MDR TB. So the population was limited to XDR or MDR patients who are not responsive or resistant to MDR treatment. This was a single-arm study using the maximum dose of linezolid, which is 1,200 milligram once daily for 6 months. 109 patients or participants were recruited from one country, which is South Africa. And as you can see, most of them were XDR TB patients. The results of this study was excellent. Excellent high efficacy of 90% of the participants had favorable outcome 6 months after end of treatment. This is very high efficacy compared to the historical favorable outcome data before the BPAL regimen. And this was both clinical and bacteriological cure 6 months after end of treatment. NextDB was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2020, and actually based on this trial, we got the FDA approval, the European Medicine Agency approval, and BPAL regimen was recommended by the WHO under operational research just for XDR and selected MDR patients. So that was in 2019, 2020, and because of the high adverse events of linezolid associated with the maximum dose of linezolid of 1200 milligram, we decided to conduct a follow-up trial, which is Xenix trial in the next slide. So Xenix was the rationale for Xenix. We observed very high efficacy in NIX, 90% of patients with favorable outcome. However, this very high efficacy came with adverse events related to the high dose of linezolid. The main two adverse events were peripheral neuropathy, reported by majority of participants in NIX, and myelosuppression or anemia, reported by almost half of participants in NIX. So we decided to conduct Xenix with lower doses or durations of linezolid to see if we can maintain the same high efficacy with reduced adverse events. Next slide, please. So we randomized 181 patients from 4 countries, Russia, Moldova, South Africa, and Georgia. So it's not a single country, 4 countries. And we used different doses and durations of linezolid. We used a dose and duration similar to NIX, 1200 milligram for 6 months, or shorter duration, or half the dose, which is 600 milligram for 6 months, or both half the dose and half the duration, or not half the duration, shorter duration. The duration of treatment 6 months, and the primary endpoint was 6 months after end of treatment. Important to note here that the population was expanded, not only XDR or some selected MDR patients, but also pre-XDR patients. Next slide, please. The conclusions from Xenix that we observed very high efficacy, 90%, similar to what we observed safety, and suggest that a 600 milligram of linezolid for 6 months will have the most favorable risk-benefit profile. And actually, this was reflected in the WHO rapid communication that came out last week in May 2022. Next slide, please. An additional clinical evidence came from TB Practical, and TB Practical was conducted by our partners, MSF, or Doctors Without Borders. And in this study, the population was expanded to any drug-resistant TB. So not only XDR, not only pre-XDR or MDR, but also any REF-resistant TB, which is a great improvement in this study. And the evidence from this study was evaluated together with, along with NIX and Xenix by the GDG, the group for drug development guidelines in the WHO 2 months ago. And the results from TB Practical, Xenix, NIX, and other studies were reflected in the rapid communication by the WHO. Again, in this study, the dose of linezolid was 600 milligrams, similar to what we used in Xenix. Next slide, please. So to link the evidence from these 3 clinical trials to the rapid communication that came last week by WHO, again, based on Xenix and TB Practical, the previous recommendation in 2020 or 2019/2020 was for only XDR patients or some selected MDR patients. Now the new communication was for all drug-resistant TB patients, at least rifampicin-resistant TB. I think this is a great improvement, and it is based on TB Practical and Xenix. Also, the previous communication, the previous guidance from WHO was for operation research. Now we see that all DR patients can be treated under programmatic conditions, which is great. And also the 600 milligram linezolid, supported by evidence from Xenix and from TB Practical, was recommended. The previous recommendation was 1200 milligram. It was associated with adverse events. 600 milligram seems to be better safety with the same efficacy. Also in the previous guidelines by the WHO, there was some concerns, theoretical concerns about the male toxicity for reproductive system in males. However, in this new rapid communication, we see that concerns were addressed, and TB Alliance took these concerns very seriously. We did some analysis in hormone data, and that was published. We did a paternity survey asking male patients who participated in our clinical trials, and the results were very encouraging. We published some toxicological data on monkeys, and there was no toxicity in primates. So these concerns now were addressed, and it has been communicated in the WHO rapid communication that came last week. Next slide, please. So I'd like to thank all patients and participants who were enrolled in these clinical trials, Xenix, TB Practical, and all these clinical trials, and all investigators and site staff, donors and funders, and all our partners. This was my last slide. Please feel free to ask any questions either now or by the end of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Salah. Do we have any questions, needs for clarification, or other questions for Salah? Again, please feel free to write them into the Q&A function or just raise your hand. Okay, we'll get some feedback from everybody a little bit later. Thank you so much, Salah. Oksana, did you have a question?
No, I'm just very happy about this great news coming from the WHO about acknowledging actual the impact of B-PAL regimen. So that's a great idea. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. Let's now I'd like to introduce Sandeep Januja, our head of market access from TB Alliance. Hi, Sandeep. Sandeep, we're actually not able to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
It's a little bit difficult to hear.
Oh, I'll come closer to the microphone. Is it better?
Yes, it is. Thank you so much.
Okay. I don't want to be looking into the camera. Sorry, so I'll switch it off. Okay, I'm speaking very close to my computer. Just
no problem. You can turn your video off.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Stephanie and Oksana. Excited to speak with the community colleagues here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know you're joining from all over the world. Before I go into status updates for B-PAL access, let me establish some context. Next slide. as you know very broadly, and you're very well versed with this, so I'm just trying to keep it very simple. As you know very broadly, there are three major forms of TB: DS, MDR, and fluoroquinolone resistant TB, also known as pre-XDR TB. Can you click once, Stephanie? And today, we're just focusing on the two on the right-hand side. And as you know, BPAL-based regimens address the latter two forms of TB, MDR and fluoroquinolone resistance, where treatment has been traditionally long, 9 to 20 months, and in a few years back, even longer. Of the total incidence of about 500,000 in these two forms of TB, as many of you would know, only 1/3 of the patients are treated. And treatment success rates are low. They are in the 50 to 60% range. Again, you would know this. This is just a reminder and context. And these success rates have risen only recently because a new drug, bedaquiline, was introduced and has been ramped up in usage in the last 2 or 3 years. Next slide. And again, as you know very well, that treatment for DRTB, again, are two broad types: longer regimens and shorter regimens. Next slide. And longer regimens are the customized regimens designed from a selection of 12 odd drugs from 3 different categories. Next slide. Using a 7-step decision support algorithm that requires the treating clinician to consider not only the resistance profile of the patient, but of the community, of past medications taken, comorbidities, and many, many other considerations. So it's complicated. And you can see that some of these regimens are very, very large with many medicines. Next slide. The simplest possibility is theoretically 4 drugs for 18 months. But after taking in account all the considerations I spoke about, the treatment does become rapidly complicated. But theoretically, even if one were to get the simplest regimen, it is 18 months, it is 4 drugs, and the minimum treatment cost for the programs is usually in the $1,300–1,400 range. Next slide. Now, one would think that the shorter regimens will be better, but they are, in the sense that they reduce treatment duration to 9 to 11 months. But with 7 drugs, and the cost is about $900. But what's important to note is that barring one drug, bedaquiline, which was developed about 10 years back, other drugs are very, very old. Average age of antibiotics in this regimen is 53 years, with the oldest drug going up to as much as 69 years. And everybody knows here there is resistance to antibiotics over time when they are used. And imagine the resistance that would have accumulated to many of these in different populations over such a long period of time. But let me ask a question. Do you know what the usual maximum age of a passenger airplane is? Can you click, Stephanie, once? It's 30 years. So next slide. So if you would you trust your life to a 30-year-old plane? And if not, would you trust your life to old failing antibiotics, which have just about half the chance that they're going to work? But that's exactly what we are doing today when we put people on old TB treatments. But we didn't have that choice so far because that's all we had. Next slide. In contrast, BPAL, as my colleague Salah explained, is a 3-drug regimen consisting of all 3 relatively new drugs, with Predominant being brand new. That means there is minimal accumulated background resistance to the regimen, and hence, no wonder success rates are in the 90% range in Nix and Xenix studies. And the experience from operations research seems to be consistent as of now. Next slide. So with that background, let's just look at how far we have come in the first 2 years since approval of Predominant by US FDA. In this relatively short period of time, Predominant has been approved by overall 18 agencies, including US FDA, EMA, and WHO's pre-qualification program, and many other countries. The WHO guidance to implement BPAL under operations research conditions that came out in June 2020, which means the regimen should be administered under very tightly monitored and controlled conditions. That means everyone who could benefit from it could not get it because we needed to get some field experience. That's gone remarkably well compared to how long it usually takes to get operations research going. And this is despite challenges of COVID. Again, WHO guidelines came out in June 2020. As you know, COVID had just begun hitting, and nobody knew how to deal with it effectively. And that's when the guidelines came out. But kudos to the countries. 14 countries began implementing BPAL under operations research conditions. It's unusual even in normal times, but during COVID, for all that to happen was quite remarkable. And the good thing that there was an early start to this is that a couple of countries are close to finishing line. Some countries have begun incorporating BPAL in their national guidelines and begun the process of scale up. But that's in a few countries. That's 2 or 3 countries. Overall, Predominant has been shipped to more than 35 countries, and there are several countries that are using the regimen outside of operations research conditions, but these countries do not have very large treatment populations. Next slide. Let's look at the availability and affordability of Predominant. Predominant has been licensed to 4 generic manufacturers, while the starting price for Predominant is of the BPAL regimen is about $700 per treatment. It's very affordable compared to the current regimens, and if you factor in the difference in treatment duration, it's even more cost effective. But having 4 manufacturers means that competition will ensure prices reduce as volumes increase. Studies done by London School, by Johns Hopkins and KNCV show that even at current prices, BPAL is highly cost effective and cost saving and highly acceptable in field settings. These studies were published in peer-reviewed journals and show that BPAL could save as much as 80% over cost of medicines, and acceptability is close to 90% in field settings. Next slide. So, as I was saying, BPAL has been used in field settings in 14 odd countries, plus many other countries. So no wonder there are positive stories about the use of BPAL have started coming out, and the user experience has so far been quite good. We are getting a few of them we have curated and put on this slide, which I won't take you through. But if you have your own experiences and stories, please share them with us. We'd love to make sure that others who need to hear get them. Of course, I mean, if they are stories or experiences which are not very good, even that is very, very important for us to know. Next slide. So in summary, there has been significant groundwork for BPAL implementation in the last 2 years, which relates to putting in place extensive manufacturing and supply chain, regulatory approvals and submissions, initial WHO guidelines, which are now going to final guidelines. Global availability has not been a problem. The product is available wherever it's needed. It's priced well and affordable. And there has been widespread operations research and implementation experience despite COVID. And there is even more evidence within 2 years of the first approval, that is Xenix and TB Practical. So one may say all is good. But I don't know. So that's what we would like to discuss today. What comes next? And is this enough? Next slide. So let's talk about what next. So with 14 early adopter countries, as I see it, at a very, very high level, once the WHO has recommended use of BPAL programmatically, the next steps could be that the 14 early adopter countries that are doing operations research will rapidly start planning for transition from operations research to programmatic use. Other countries that have been waiting and haven't begun using BPAL will activate plans to adopt the new regimen, the new regimens, BPAL and BPAL-M. That hopefully will mean that there will be a rapid change in national guidelines in many countries, and eventually the regimen will get into the hands of people who need them. Okay, click once, Stephanie. But that process could take up to 4 years based on the interviews we have conducted in many countries. This is a very slow process. However, can you click once, Stephanie? However, it may be possible to shrink that process in most countries. And the key factor to reduce that time lag, it is robust demand from the communities. Can you click again, Stephanie? For change to modern medicine. And it's you who can make a big difference by advocating for new regimens. It is not only about BPAL or BPAL-M, it is about bedaquiline. The current penetration, if I'm not mistaken, of bedaquiline in MDR treatment, which has been recommended for WHO for quite some time, is just about 25-30%. So imagine if everyone can benefit from 6-month regimen, and it takes us many years to reach that 20-30% usage, that will be a lost opportunity. So I think there has to be an ask, there has to be a respectful demand from the community for access to modern medicine, and that could make all the difference. Of course, if you need any information on the status of BPAL in your country or in your region, or any information that will help you in your own efforts, please let us know, and we'd be happy to respond. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them now or later in this webinar.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. I just want to open up for any questions that are coming in for Sandeep on what TB Alliance has done to prepare for access, particularly over the last several years, getting operational research studies, supporting operational research studies in multiple countries, and now what the next steps are with this new guidance. We have a question from Ezio. I don't have control for your audio, but if you can unmute yourself, please do. Otherwise, I'll ask Reva to please allow you to unmute, or Karin. Ezio, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Sandeep, for the presentation. And I think your last slide shows that it's now time for the communities to understand its role and how this can benefit the society, etc. So I think we have to work closer now to the communities in terms of not only informing, but empowering and making the participation of communities in the process of implementation stronger in a way that people can benefit of the advances and the learning from those studies. This is a particularly important time for us, also with new results that will be coming soon. We expect the Simplicity results will also be shared soon. So this will be very exciting for the communities to be engaging in a deeper discussion of how can we implement that. But I will count with the TB Alliance support from the team to be also discussing with the communities how this is a way forward. I think the economics, as you showed, present the benefits also for the health systems in terms of reducing the cost of the long treatments and the benefits for the individuals under treatment with an excellent outcome. Yet, we know that in programmatic conditions, we have a different outcome than in clinical studies, because in clinical studies we have conditions are obviously improved, and the people are surrounded by some attention that sometimes in the programmatic conditions they are not. So these are the questions, how we are, the challenges that we are going to face when trying to implement the new regimens. But again, thank you, and I'm hoping to be working close to you all soon so that we can act firmly towards the benefits to those affected by TB, MDR, and XDR.
Thank you so much, Ezio. Oksana, I saw your hand up as well, but Sandeep, do you want to go ahead and respond?
Sure. Look, thank you, Ezio. I agree with you 100% that we will need to work closely with the communities. We've been fortunate that we have been in the field of research for very long, and we have been able to get very strong community involvement around our research activities. And I think the time is right for us to ramp that up to include engagement around access activities as well. And we would be more than happy to share with you what our success efforts are, successes are, and setbacks have been as we try to create access to predominant and BPAL-based regimens. So if the participants on this call have any suggestions, ideas, proposals, please let us know. We'll be very happy to consider what we can do working together, or involve other stakeholders as we work on BPAL. It's going to take a village to get it out in the hands of everyone. And as you, thank you very much for saying that we will need to work together. About the question on access to predominant in Russia. So in Russia, the requirement is to have local clinical data and a local manufacturer. So those are two requirements because of which predominant has not been available yet, because the results of the Xenix trial will be important for a Russian approval. And since the trial just wrapped up in, I think the data came in late last year, to analyze that data, including the Russian part of the data, and submit it and get approval is the process that has taken time. Yes, the war has affected things adversely. The exchange rate went all over the place for some time, so that affects commercials. that you have in place with a local manufacturer versus our global partner. So there have been some effect of that. So we'll have to see how long that lasts, but our focus will be to try to get Predominant approved with this Russian evidence as soon as possible and get it out there. The short answer is yes, there has been an impact because of commercial issues and exchange rates, etc. But that may not be very, very long lasting. But of course, there are other issues like regulatory and all what happens. So we are watching for that. There is a question which
I have that translated. Yeah,
okay.
I have it translated. Thanks, Sandeep. We do have another written question from Marcos in Brazil saying this initiative is very important, but how can I advance in my country of Brazil since patients here are not even able to access health services because they live far from these health units? And most of them are people without resources such as access. Even more, we do not have specific beds in the network for healthcare for TB patients who stay together with other patients and other diseases without any type of control. And I wonder if, Ezio, you might want to respond to Marcos as well as anyone else about, the need for more information and advocacy from TB patients in Brazil.
Yeah, gladly. I think Marco's point is very important. It has to do with what I was speaking previously, which are the reality of the programmatic conditions at each country. Sometimes people with TB or the diseases are turned back and are not, how to say, properly received by the system as in the proper conditions. Marcos, as myself, he has had episodes of TB and he lived himself. Sorry, Marcos, to put this up front, but I know that you are very open about that. In the same room, people with different diseases were being treated. But these are the programmatic conditions that we have to discuss. We have to be realistic, and we have to face when we are advocating for the improvement of treatment. This is one aspect of that. Another aspect of that is how do we improve access to better drugs and better treatments, better regimens, as we are doing here. It is important, sorry, got a cold. It is important that we distinct the two things because they are both very important, but we have to work in both fields. And this is, Sandeep was mentioning before about the low engagement of communities in previous studies, etc. This is a learning thing, Sandeep. I mean, the communities have been engaged into research there in the last 15 years or maximum 20 years, not even that. So this is a process where communities are being empowered, they are learning, they are receiving treatment and research literacy, and they are able to do the work that they understand, which is discuss access and policies. And this is a key role for the communities, but definitely we have to be very conscient, and I thank Marcos for bringing this aspect, because the BPAL regimen and other shorter regimens that the studies are bringing will allow people to have shorter treatments and receive the best conditions, and and most importantly, get cured from very difficult diseases. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ezio. I see another hand up from Barbara. If you don't mind, Barbara, we're just going to move on in the agenda to make sure that we have time to cover everything, and I will circle back to you, I do promise. But please also, in the meantime, feel free to write your question into the Q&A function. I'm just going to run one last poll, but want to hand over this discussion now to Oksana to talk about this, very real need to just discuss the reality of the situation and what next really for advocates in civil society and community that have been engaging in research up to now. What do you do with this guidance? And we all hear this very clear call to action from Sandeep also, that it does take mobilization from the community to see these changes put in place at the country level. The next poll I want to put up is just to get a sense from everybody how often your countries will change TB treatment guidelines. So Reva, if you don't mind, oh great, that poll is up. Just please respond these, great, and we'll see this live here. And then Oksana is going to take this conversation over because this is very real to her in Moldova as well.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm just wondering whether I should share my screen or Reva will help with sharing. Yeah, that's great.
Reva's got you.
Absolutely. I think that today's discussion is absolutely crucial, and Sandeep's and Salah coming with all those news is actually for us to understand. And the things that I was about to tell at the beginning of this webinar is to understand where we now. We are in the middle of a revolution in a way, because it's even this strong argument given by Sandeep about this average age of a drug-resistant treatment regimen, 53 years, it's absolutely it's impossible to tolerate more. We need to understand that we need to advocate, and right now we do have this basement, this strong foundation to ask for policy change inside our countries. And the things, as you as well mentioned, is for us to have at the end of the webinar the understanding, a kind of plan. What are we going to do inside our country? Because we do have this WHO recommendation, but what we can do inside our countries to influence the update of the national protocols. And we hope we will have results. Reva, if you can share with us the results of the pool to see how often the guidelines change, and we see that we have a high proportion of people who actually don't know. I will suggest people who are now participating that's the first thing to do for you, is to go to your national TB program and to ask what are the regulatory framework to change a guideline inside your country. Because we have the WHO recommendation, but to have the drug and to have regimen accessible for our patients in every specific country, we need to adjust the national guidelines. And the average actual time is 2 years. That's the average time, which allows planning budget, allows planning the funding for the regimens, and that's important to know. And I think the average period mentioned by Sandeep from 2 to 4 years to have and to benefit from the shorter treatment regimen, I would say is quite a good time, because taking into consideration 53 average age for drug regimen, it's a good progress. And let's hope that at least in 2 years from now, we will have more countries accessing the shorter drug-resistant regimens accessible in their countries. So thank you so much for this, for listening. And I will go to my shorter presentation. Reva, please, could you change my slide? I will just mention, and I will echo the words of Sandeep, that TB after this period long of time still remains to be a public threat, and it is mostly due to this possible limited investments in research, but we're not allowing this great progresses which are happening actually right now, following this decade of innovation and the appearance of at least 3 innovative drugs in the sphere of tuberculosis. So what is important to know, but significant progress in the availability of and improved diagnostic actually mode and showed higher treatment success rates among patients with drug-resistant MDR-TB in several countries, and that's going to the WHO 2021 Global TB report. For this, we need to acknowledge that the collection of data and research studies, clinical studies, operational studies are those tools which are used to collect and to inform guidelines for better performance in treatment regimens. The role of civil society, of community engagement and research and development actually gives legitimacy, and these are the words of Yezio. Thanks, Yezio, for learning, for making us understand how important it is to have community engagement in research and development, engaged fully effectively with stronger voice, and make the TB activist communities as vocal as possible in their specific settings, because communities and civil society are those promoters, are those engines inside the country that can speed the progress of these important results of any study. Next slide, please. When we're speaking about the community engagement, it's speaking about the principles of a good participatory practice, and we do know that we have a very important guideline, and at least once the TB advocate, which is considered to be good, needs to open this guidelines and have a look and see what is actually imposed by and guided by this good participatory practice, because we managed to understand working with communities, but not many advocates actually knows how to use the good participatory practice as an instrument in their advocacy life. Study results and scientific evidence, as I already said, are efficient tools for advocating and implement new technologies. And new technologies are new medicines. These are hard technologies, and soft technologies is a little bit more difficult to implement, because we are speaking about these programmatic issues at country levels, about adjusting protocols, guidelines inside every specific country, taking into consideration all the specifics and all these barriers or opportunities to do it quicker or less quicker. And for this, we understand that we need to do it in order to achieve and to make policy change, because only with having these soft protocols inside the country, we can introduce the study results. We can introduce the study results, and we can translate the results we have into treatment, diagnostic, and care, which is accessible in the country. And that's lie specifically on the shoulder of every country, of every national TB program, civil society, and TB stakeholders inside the country. Next slide, please. I would not be very long, because then Sandeep and Salah spoke about the BPAL regimen. What is the BPAL regimen? Nix as this promoter and the beginner of the Xenix study. The WHO recommendation that came out of the Nix experiences and Nix results, with a specific recommendation to be implemented back in 2020. And now, after 2 years, we already have Xenix with the results. Next slide, please. And the new WHO rapid communication, which actually guides us and give us an opportunity to advocate more strong already, not only with the condition recommendation of using BPAL, but with a stronger recommendation for programmatic use of this important two regimens. And we're speaking about BPAL regimen and BPAL plus moxifloxacin regimen for our patients in the country. Next slide, please. I don't know whether all of you managed, I'm speaking about the audience, to have an opportunity to open the rapid communications. I would say that that's the rapid communication, which is actually dedicated to this absolutely crucial, important to BPAL treatment regimens, because since 2020, new evidence has arose, a stronger evidence, and new regimens, including BPAL and BPAL moxifloxacin, are actually those regimens which support new recommendation for the programmatic use of these two regimens. In the same time, it is important to understand the local context in our countries, because along with the shorter treatment regimens, we need to ensure that we have good diagnostic tools. We have access to the tools that will give us the understanding of the resistance profile, because that's an absolutely important issue to approach. Once we don't have good diagnostic tool, I don't think we can actually promote and advocate for shorter treatment regimens. It needs to be both. And for this, civil society and community should be really informed, should be in a continuous learning process to see how to operate with all those knowledge which is now available worldwide, and how to operate with the WHO recommendation, how to operate with the results of the Xenix or other clinical operational research, to be sure that we are using correctly all the data and we are trying to inform the TB stakeholders in our countries correctly. Next slide, please. What we're doing in our country is actually, we are specifically talking about Moldova, is to mention that we have a strong network of TB and HIV organization working almost for more than 10 years in the field. And what is the focus of the organization in the country is, of course, to make the best benefits of the research available to our patients and the people living with the disease, but in the same time is to increase potential and knowledge of the TB advocates and HIV advocates, to be sure that we are aligned and we are informed about everything which is going on worldwide in the sphere of research and development. For this, beyond only the civil society, we have a couple of national level networking spaces. We have a key affected population platform separately. We have an NGOs which are based platform combining TB organization. Of course, an important place in TB and HIV response in the country is the country coordinating mechanism, who is coordinating the grants of the global coming from the Global Fund. We have different technical working groups which involve civil society and community representatives, and believe me, it's a huge work, and no matter how difficult it is, it's important at any occasion to be present at every technical working group, to be informed about what is going on in the country. Next slide, please. When we are speaking about the roles of the communities and civil society, just a few sentences is to say that we are perceived as service delivery actors. So it's service delivery is an important role played by civil society and community. And for these, civil society have access directly to vulnerable groups, as being very close to those issues which are going on inside the country, and at the same time being able to voice the needs of the affected populations in the country. For this, it's absolutely important, having this opportunity, is to try to constantly improve the performance of our work as in service delivery. And we are speaking about active case finding of tuberculosis. We're speaking about direct observed treatment done with the support of community and civil society. We're speaking about introducing new technologies, about video supported treatment in our country as well, psychological, social services, juridical services. It is all done and can be done in any country, while civil society is constantly trying to perform and to improve their performance on speaking about the quality of their services. One of our experience at country level has been acknowledged in a WHO compendium on best practices at community, at country level. So next slide, please. Next slide, Lorena. Community contribution, of course, one of the community contribution is to be able to influence and to participate meaningfully in research and development. And for this, again, to stress, it's necessary for these advocates who respect themselves is to know what are the ongoing trials in our country. While once you know it, you can influence. Once you don't know, but you actually have an opportunity to influence. What we can do when we are in engaging in research and development is to contribute, of course, first of all, to the TB and research literacy, to build synergies with the research team in the countries, is to advocate for community inclusion from the start of any study. And that's something which has been mentioned as something which still needs to be tackled, because it is a barrier and it is very difficult to engage a community in the process of design of a study. Transparency in research, and this is again going back to the now what are the ongoing trials in your country. Try to advocate for removal of regulatory barriers, because without taking and understanding how we can actually influence the access to any drug specifically or treatment regimens in the country, you will not succeed in having this all these benefits of the research available for the patients in your setting. And of course, one of the main focus of your advocacy work as a civil society and a community is to advocate for timely treatment guidelines updates, and that's something Sandeep managed. We need to advocate, to start advocate for the update of the treatment guidelines right now, and we do have this basement at least to start to negotiate and to speak with the national TB coordinator, national TB programs, members of technical working groups in your countries about the potential of having the shorter treatment regimens available in your country. Building evidence on patients' experience, again, one important intervention which can be done in your country. And on the next slide, you can actually see some reports which has been done with the support of the civil society organization, community, TB advocates have been engaged in collecting all this data regarding different specific issue in the country to inform our national TB program about emerging issues, about these needs and gaps which should be addressed in the country. And all of these reports are available on our site. Next slide, please. What we managed to do as a civil society and how we managed to influence policy in Moldova is, of course, to be in line with everything. And that's a learning process. That's a complex, I would say, a complex mechanism where you need to be in every time. You need to incorporate in planning and TB council. And I think for communities and for TB advocates who are now at that session, is important to be everywhere where it is possible. I know it's always very difficult to find time because it's almost all volunteer work, but without being present in any TB Policy Council, any technical working group, any coordinating country mechanism, we will actually miss a lot of opportunities to voice the concerns, to voice the research benefits which are on the horizon and which would be available for our patients. What we managed to do, concrete examples, is to introduce an component of community-based trials in our national TB program. We introduced and advocated strongly to have a community representative in the ethics committee of our National TB Institute. We advocated to have civil society activities and services integrated in the National TB program, and our National TB program for this, which is now running on, is taking into consideration and has been developed with a strong and active participation of civil society and community representative in the country. We have developed and managed to develop again, together with the team of the National TB Institute and National TB Program, standards for civil society activities, because we do know that if we have standards, we can improve the performance of the activities of civil society in the countries. We managed to ask and to obtain public funding, and that's something absolutely important for the country, to have acknowledged the activities done by the civil society and have public funding for active case finding of TB in the country provided for civil society. Results dissemination and crucial, I would say, exercise in the country to be done and to be, I think, to be rethink, to be reformed in the upcoming days, to be sure that when we disseminate the Xenix results is to ensure that we make connection with the WHO recommendation. For this, we need to do all our best. What is for now is to arrange and negotiate with TB stakeholders in the country the revision, the revision of the TB guidelines at national level, taking into account the WHO recent rapid communication, and to see how we can make this process to happen more and more quicker. And the last slide, thank you, is some messages to take away, is to acknowledge and to say once again that communities, civil society, and TB advocates are contributors, are valuable contributors to improve policies. We need to stay informed regarding new WHO recommendation for TB to be able to voice the needs and gaps in time and timely. Reach out to TB stakeholders in our countries to convince of necessary changes for the improvement of treatments, and to participate in policy meetings to understand the governmental decision-making on TB and advocate for timely policy change. And I think that's the key words, timely policy change in our countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Oksana. I know we do have a hand raised, but I just want to acknowledge that we're running a little close to the end of our hour and a half. I want to put up the poll, if we can, on methods for disseminating information so that we can get that going as we transition to Thomas talking about communication methods. And while we're doing that, Ksenia, if you have a quick question for Oksana, please go ahead. You just have to unmute yourself, Ksenia. Ksenia, do we have you? We're not able to hear you. Ksenia, if you want to type your question into the chat just as a backup, and if we do have your microphone working at some point, we'll come back to you again. In the meantime, we do see, I don't know, Reva, if you can share the results so we can see what everyone is saying about how they disseminate information. in their countries, this will be a good transition, I think, to messages and communicating.
Thanks very much. I really appreciate the input on the poll. It looks like there are a lot of different ways that people like to disseminate and learn about results from TB research. I'd like to very briefly offer some kind of high-level takeaways on what we're seeing coming out of the rapid communication, just to very simply distill that paper into some messages for everyone on this call to digest and take back to your communities and use as you see fit as in your description of what does this new guidance mean for patients and all people with DRTB. So on the next slide, I just have the 3 clinical trials that really, I think, did the most in terms of informing the WHO's decision-making. You're all familiar with these. Nix and Xenix showed the safety and efficacy of the BPAL regimen in highly resistant TB. The TB Practical, sponsored by MSF, showed the BPAL, 3 BPAL-based regimens for all DRTB, including BPAL-M. So together, the WHO has looked at these studies and come up with some, I think, very compelling recommendations, which, as Oksana said, have placed us in the middle of a revolution. On the next slide, I just have the real headline message, which is that the BPAL-M and BPAL regimens have showed high treatment success. Effectively, all people with drug-resistant TB can be treated with a 6-month, all-oral, highly effective therapy under programmatic conditions. So that's BPAL-M for treatment of all DRTB, and if moxifloxacin is shown to be resistant, BPAL alone is recommended. So this is a significant change in where we were, as our previous speakers have shown, and I think it is really a compelling outcome that we should all be very excited about and able to really drum up some policy transition in the near future. Beyond the efficacy, I do want to also point out a couple of safety findings. Again, nothing that hasn't already been spoken to, but the linezolid dosing, I think, is key. That's something that the Xenix trial, which many of you have participated in and are responsible for helping make happen, showed that we can reduce the dosing of linezolid while maintaining the high efficacy that we saw in the Nix trial. That is a key finding that the WHO affirmed in this recommendation, suggesting that the optimal dosing is 600 milligrams daily over the 6-month period. That is about half of what we used with Nix, but one of the 4 arms that we showed in the Xenix trial. And with respect to reproductive safety, that's something where the evidence that has been presented from our hormonal toxicity research, as well as paternity survey, and will be further added to with the ongoing Siemens study that some of you were involved with, that will contribute to this conclusion that the evidence has largely alleviated those concerns on reproductive toxicity. So in short, that boils down to that BPAL regimens can be safely administered based on the evidence that has been presented and worked its way into this guidance. So on the next slide, I just want to also take a moment to zoom out to what does this mean for people with DRTB? This basically means all of the 500,000 people who develop DRTB each year, whether through their therapy failing or whether it's through direct person-to-person transmission through the air, all of them could potentially be eligible for a 6-month, all-oral, effective therapy. And specifically, geographically, we have 30 countries that the WHO has identified as being where DRTB is hitting hardest. So that's about 4 in 5 cases take place in these 30 countries. So it's certainly a pandemic. It's everywhere, and it's most concentrated in these 30, mostly low and middle income countries. Again, having a simple 3 to 4 drug therapy for all people with DRTB is a significant opportunity to simplify treatment for TB and hope to win back some of the hard-won gains that have been lost due to COVID-19 and also just decades of having to rely on old, ineffective drugs for this disease. So to boil down, this is great news for patients. We have a pull quote from TB Alliance's CEO here explaining what this means, and a photo from the operational research happening in Philippines, which has been a leader both in research for TB as well as rolling out access to new therapies. So we are in a very exciting time, and I really want to encourage everyone to help spread the word about what this means for patients. And we look forward to working with you down the road as we ensure that new therapies can become accessible and really achieve public health impact against DRTB. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thomas. That's really helpful to have that information that, as you say, is really impactful statements that boil down, the takeaways from the guidance and how we can share this information with peers. Oksana and I would like to invite Louis to join us now for a discussion about the Philippines context. And, as this picture shows, the operational research study in the Philippines was very successfully implemented, and Louis, as leader of TB People in the Philippines, has been leading an effort in partnership with the NTP and another TB program personnel in the Philippines to engage with civil society around BPAL operational research. Now we'd love to have this conversation with you about your reaction to the newest guidance and what it means as you look ahead at transitioning to the reality of programmatic use.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so when I heard about this rapid communications May 2 morning, I was able to inform our more than 30 plus DRTB patients. We're handling the peer support for all of the regimens in the country because nobody's doing it. And I've taken that action to actually explain to them. My survivors are able to get this training from the National TB Program with the help, of course, of the Lung Center of the Philippines training team, for us to understand the algorithm, manual of procedures, 6th edition of the Philippines, and make sure we know all of the terms being used in the program. So currently treating persons with TB are very appreciative that we teach them every single day on what they're drinking, what are the side effects, adverse drug reactions, what are the new information from the outside. And they really admire the idea that I want them to finish to be future leaders as well. So for me, of course, I understand what rapid communications is all about. I'm very anticipating for the better option, of course, lesser pill burden, lesser length. And of course, I know that currently our regimen is still not possible for my case of extrapulmonary tuberculosis minus TB meningitis, and I'm now totally blind. And I think, in the future, we will also have those updates for my case as well, and also for younger age bracket for the usage of the BPAL regimen.
Thanks, Louis. Oksana, I'm just going to pass to you some questions for
Thank you,
Louis.
Stephanie. Yeah,
Mhm.
I have some question for you, Louis, if it's possible, just to understand what was your highest level of engagement and advocacy in the country, how you managed to advocate for the changes, and what are those platforms or technical working groups you are joining to advocate for changes? Thank you.
Okay, so it's really tough. I started back in 2009, right after I finished my 2 years of treatment. I started to just engage with our Global Fund, the country coordinate mechanism as one of the key affected population representatives. And then I was able to get a lot of international engagements like GCTA, our GFAN as representative or ambassador of the GFAN speakers. At the same time, I was able to really understand the whole framework because I was able to work for WHO as an intern. I got inside the whole participation because of my knowledge about the disease, and I really researched on what happened to me because I want justice, why I had to go blind. And it took more than a decade for me to be able to reach this far, because I started just participating as a community representative, and then I asked for how can I help monitor what the country is doing. They asked me to you need to have a registered legal organization. So I had to look for members. I had to look for proactive survivors, because I believe that the change has to start from us. And one by one, I was able to get international support as well from our TB People Global colleagues. I'm very thankful for them for teaching me on how to implement a national chapter. And here, I'm able to now participate in all of the technical working groups of National TB Program, and even the implementers of the programs of USAID, of our Global Fund grant recipients. They now ask us to chip in on some of the service deliveries, on how to understand the community we're serving. So it takes time, but you have to be diplomatic. You have to listen properly where you fit, and then you can contribute on ways that they cannot. So that's what I'm asking all of my advocates to remember, that they have the power to change. It's just a matter of for them to continue believing in themselves, and not just think of them as a key affected population.
One more clarifying question, and maybe just a prognosis. If we are speaking about Philippines, what will be your estimate to understand and to have access to BPAL treatment regimens in the Philippines on a programmatic use? Can you estimate when can it happen? I'm just curious about it, because I know that's absolutely very difficult to do, and to see how you can think, how quick can it happen actually in the country?
In terms of course, I have information inside that we are, of course, still proceeding with the OR enrollees, and at the same time, we need to make sure that all of our SSOR, SLOR enrollees will be finished properly before we actually introduce the BPAL regimen. But the whole idea is not just the NTP schedule. It's really because of the demand generation that the community can provide to them. At the same time, when TB Alliance helped me with a project on TB education, I was able to convert the algorithm, the manual of procedures of the country into 8 dialects. Remember, we have more than 180 dialects. I started with 8, but I was able to reach 2,500 audience in just 9 months, meaning the Filipinos are waiting for information. No, but it's just that nobody's giving it to them. So that's my take on that. So if with all of the treatment, assistance we're doing virtually because it's lockdown, we were able to talk to 20 or more a day, asking for information on what this medication is, what we're supposed to tell our nurses, what we're supposed to be understanding about the terms that we're signing, because the programmatic DR treatment, they give you something to sign. They don't understand that. So we provide those holistic approach to all of our persons with TB, with DRTB. And if they know about this rapid communications, they know about the soon to be released handbook of WHO and the guidelines at the end of the year, they know that we will be able to estimate so many of them who are knowledgeable will be asking that from our program, from our service delivery facility. So it's just really demand generation. We need to inform the community affected, and then they will be the one to ask for policy change.
Thank you. It's absolutely important to understand that the community is actually this engine which will make the demand generation and ask for change, because otherwise
Yes.
if we will stay and wait, it may happen, it may never happen in a way. And just some thoughts about, because I know Xenix is as well at the webinar, how important is to mention that there are a lot of difficulties at country level, because we are speaking about the systematic approach to TB, and we're speaking about the vertical TB systems, which is easier to do, and we can, when everything is under one umbrella, and you can just say that we decide and we will take this regimen and uptake and scale up and make it available. And it's the other issue, and we have this decentralized system, and we have a lot of districts all over the country, and every district has its own institute or a TB hospital, and it decide. And that's the biggest issue for large countries of decentralized system. And probably those are the questions which will lie and which will be more difficult to deal in the countries with this kind of approach to TB treatments.
Actually, the election year just finished, and we are now sure that we are now proceeding to federalism. And with a new constitutional reform, we now know that all of the centralized treatment program will now be localized. That's why I'm now creating city associations of TB people and making sure that these small groups will be the one to be lobbying to their local chief executives, making sure that the implementation of the TB program up to the redevolved DRTB up to the BPAL implementation will be monitored by us, because nobody is doing that from the central government, advised directly by the National TB program to me.
Yes, absolutely crucial to mention. The other fact is to understand that when we're speaking about the introducing new treatment regimens, we need to take into consideration who will be funding the introduction. And when we're speaking about high burden countries, so now what we have donors, because we have global funds. And when it comes to speak about the project proposals for global fund, we as civil societies, communities need to advocate and to be sure that we will have this needs addressed in the new global fund grant proposals. So just keep in mind about this budgeting and connected budgets to the national guidelines, because it's all connected in a cycle of making the treatment regimens available for TB.
Yes,
people.
and they have to really understand the institutional mapping of their country, because we don't have the same structures. But here in the country, recently the Global Fund has announced that our providing of medication will just be up to 2024. So the TB program will solely be depending on the local government. That's why the civil society will be the one to make sure the bottoms-up budgeting approach should be utilized. We need to lobby. We need to lobby hard, because we know that the money is in the local government. So we have to really prepare once the global fund shifts to health system strengthening, and make sure that from the first line DSTB up to the DRTB, ex-DRTB medication should be provided by our mayors.
Absolutely agree with you, Louis. It's important to understand the sustainability of our TB programs in countries, and to see when it comes to the public funding to come with strong arguments. And we've seen some of them given by Sandeep, with this economical expenses and economical impact for the shorter treatment regimens. We need to learn all of this information to be sure that we can operate with all of this when time comes. Thank you.
Yes, more people, more power.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
That's
you.
a great statement to end on. Thank you so much, Louis and Oksana. We are 3 minutes past the time that our meeting was supposed to go. I know we're going to lose a few people on right now. I just want to transition to one last comment about, helping our participants on the call today that have been participating in community advisory boards at the very local level near our research sites, and have been mostly focusing all of their engagement in clinical trials rather than advocating for policy change. And so I think, across the TB Alliance Community Engagement Program, we've been talking over the whole last year, the series of webinars with Ezio, about what level you're advocating at and who your key stakeholder targets are. Just quickly, for anyone who's able to stay on for just a couple minutes, Reva, if you could put on the poll on the level of advocacy that everyone has access to, we'll kind of get a sense of what your current accessibility is to different stakeholders, whether this is local, national level, or international level. And then after this, we'll also have one last question on whether or not you've ever participated in one of these policymaking committees that both Oksana and Louis have mentioned a lot. CCMs, technical advisory committees, you know, as representatives of TB affected community in both Oksana and Louis and Ezio's case, I know this has been participation as TB survivors, as highly, you know, informed citizens that are very passionate to be involved in this conversation. So I just want to transition our last couple of comments to just say, you know, if we can get some last comments from Oksana, from Louis, from Ezio, whoever wants to weigh in. Oksana, please first. You know, what words of advice would you give to the rest of our participants on the call today that have been engaging in research and may want to transition to a little bit broader advocacy around this kind of guideline change, around uptake of new treatments, and know that in the series of webinars that we host for our community engagement partners throughout the year, we will continue this conversation with Oksana and others that have this experience in the coming months. But just over to you, Oksana, on that note.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, absolutely. It's important to summarize and to understand that we need to as a first step is to build partnership and to see who are those TB stakeholders which can actually not only wordly support you, but bring you to making a change and open the doors to make all these benefits, because the ultimate goal, and that's what we need to understand, what is the ultimate goal of a result dissemination exercise, participating in a clinical trial, is to bring the benefits to our TB affected communities, to make their lives easier with the disease and to finish the treatment, to end this TB experience as quick as possible. And for this strong partnership, especially with national TB programs, should be explored, encouraged, institutionalized. Memorandum agreements among communities and civil society may work. And of course, it's to understand that we need to be, but the policy making is a very complex and it's time-taking exercise. But it means that we just need to be more energetic and continue to keep our eyes and speak at any possible opportunity about these needs and gaps. Today's argument for me is the best argument is the age, the overall age of the existing drug-resistant regimen. That's absolutely not acceptable for us. We need to make a change, and there are basements for this. There are basements to promote the idea that there are opportunities, and civil societies should voice the best results of any study that managed to show such efficiency. It's absolutely important to do, and to be perseverant and consistent with all our ideas and partners and interventions to make this change happen at country level.
Yeah. Thank you, Oksana. And you know, from the few responses we received, we do have a majority of participants that are currently working at the local, subnational, and also national levels, with fewer of the participants on the call having access to the international audience. We'll just put up the last poll, which is just on your experience participating in any kind of policymaking committee. And there's a second part to this question too, about if you have done that, what stakeholder group have you represented? I do know that we have some of our research team members on the call today too. And this is to say, you know, civil society, inclusive of, you know, communities that may be affected by disease, advocates, survivors, but also healthcare providers, researchers, and physicians are needed to build this groundswell of support for new guidelines and call for change in regimen. And I'm sure both Louis and Oksana, you've worked closely with your partners in Moldova and the Philippines that are the principal investigators of operational research studies or ongoing trials like our Xenix trial and others that are essential partners in advocating for policy change as well. Great. Well, I appreciate all of your participation in the polls today. I like this feature. I think we'll try and do this more. It has really helped, but as we do this, we'll get better at incorporating this into the conversation. One regret I have is that we haven't had as much time for feedback from the participants today. One question, and I'll leave with this, and this is for you, Oksana, and possibly Louis. This is from Mzudu. Is it possible for decentralization to be furthered than it is at the moment in the wake of the present positive outcome? So Mdudu, if this is the right answer, I think what you're asking is, with the updated guidance, is there going to be more decentralization of treatment because the treatments will be simpler to manage? Is that right? And if we have anyone that would like to respond to that, or even Sala, who we may still have on the call, if you have any comments on the move towards more decentralized care, which we have seen a lot of move towards during COVID, just because of the necessity of programs to put more of that treatment management into patients' hands.
If I just can,
please.
Come with an answer. It's everything very specific because it depends on the country context. You can say that it will start the same processes and it will promote decentralization and vice versa centralization, because it depends on the country. Even the size of the country can play a crucial role in having the approach, because that's about the organization of a health system inside the country. If the country is large, of course decentralization will be and is more acceptable, because it gives more independence for local authorities to take decision and to decide. But in the same time, the national guidelines should be national at the central level and uptaken by the decentralized system in every small state or small rayon or oblast as in Russia. So, but the guidelines should be once, and that should be for everyone all over the country. Thank you.
Thanks, Oksana.
Stephanie?
Yes. Hi, Louis.
Yeah, for the decentralization, actually, that's what we are anticipating here because of universal health care and the new Bandanas law. The only fear that we have on that step would be the healthcare workers. How many are left? How many are trained properly? And at the same time, once the guidance are here for BPAL implementation, how sure are we that they'll be able to really provide a comprehensive explanation to our new persons with TB? Because that's what we're doing now. We're monitoring how they implement the policy. We're like TB police. That's what we are. TB people is trying to make sure that if they're providing the proper screening, contact tracing, and even preventive treatment. Now, with all of this new information, we will do our best as a community, and we hope more communities will join our wagon. But that would be the best solution, actually. In the 17 regions of my country, we really need more advocates, more who can really integrate all of these international information and make sure that the locals will be able to understand and we can eradicate the disease early on.
Thank you. Sala, did you have any last comments? All set?
No, nothing to add. Just I'm very excited with this excellent news for patients across the globe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you so much. Oksana, thank you so much for participating and sharing experience. And we will follow up with recordings from today, as well as some notes and a survey about next steps and when and what we should include in the upcoming webinar, which we hope to be in about a month's time to continue this conversation. Ksenia, I do see you. I don't know if you have your audio. We'd love to hear you if you're able to unmute before we disconnect today. Oh no. You go ahead and turn on your camera if you like. We're here. I don't know if it's working. Is anyone else able to hear Ksenia?
No.
No.
Unfortunately, we see she's trying. And
I know, I see that.
it's not going on.
I'm so sorry, Ksenia. We can connect after, and I'm happy to share your comments, questions or comments and your experience with everyone in part of the meeting summary, because I know you have a wealth of experience in Russia as well. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Louis, thank you so much for staying up so late to join us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy to participate.
Thank you,
evening, guys.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody. For
Bye.
being with
Thanks,
us.
everyone.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.